Assalamu alaikum students. Today I'm going to discuss a novel that is a translation from French and Algerian literature, and that novel is The Outsider, and it is written by Albert Camus. So let's start. Okay, let's start with the introduction of Albert Camus. In this slide, I'll discuss the personal life of Albert Camus, that he was born in November 7, 1913 and died in a car accident in January 4, 1960. He was born in Algeria to a French pioneer's parents. Pioneers were basically Blackfeet people, and this word is it is a slang word used for the people who were born in Algeria during 1830 to 1962. So Albert Camus spent his childhood in poverty after death of his father during World War I. He started living with his mother along with his relatives in Algeria with some basic possessions. And in 1930, at the age of 17, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Because of transmitted disease, he left his home. And in 1936, without caring his physical health, he completed his degree in philosophy at University of Algeria. And unlike other people like Arabs and Berbers, Camus was privileged French citizen, and he before becoming a celebrity, he earned money uh, and took very odd jobs like part-time tutorship or the cart part clerk, and these type of odd jobs he did before becoming a celebrity. So this is a brief introduction that is based on his personal life. As far as his professional career is concerned, now in the next slide, I'm going to discuss his professional life. Okay, and in this slide, I'm going to discuss the professional life, and I have divided Albert Camus' professional life into three groups. The first one is political, second is literary, and third is a moralist aspect of his life. His political career is very vast and very deep, and I'll discuss some major points. In 1935, before getting his degree in philosophy, he became member of French Communist Party. He thought it is the best way to fight inequalities between Europeans and natives in Algeria. Later on, he joined Algerian Communist Party, and he was also close to Algerian People's Party because he thought that this party uh, was very moderate in his anti-colonial approach. So Albert Camus was politically active person, and he was part of left-wing politics who supported social equality and egalitarianism. That is why he opposed Soviet Union, because his stance on his opposition is that Soviet Union has totalitarian approach, and this Soviet Union restricted individual opposition to state. And let me tell you one thing, that Albert Camus had strong anti-fascist feelings against fascist regimes in Europe. That is why he tried to join French resistance when Germans invaded France. Even he voluntarily tried to join army, but he was rejected on physical grounds. I think it is enough for the political career. Like his political career, Camus' literary career is also very significant. Although he has written very limited works, but his philosophy is very deep. And that is why he has received Nobel Peace Prize in Literature in 1957. And he was the second youngest recipient in the history. Actually, Camus' work have been divided into three cycles, and each cycle contained a novel and an essay and a play. And as far as his three cycles are concerned, the first cycle is called the cycle of absurd, and the second one is the cycle of revolt, and the third one is the cycle of love. In the cycle of absurd, the work comes in under this category is the outsider or the stranger, and myth of Sisyphus, and the misunderstanding. And in the second cycle, the cycle of revolt, the work that comes under this category is the plague, the rebel, and the third one is the assassin. And in third category, the cycle of love. Under this category, the work comes is the novel The First Man, that consists of the goddesses of Nemesis. And you'll see that the style of Albert Camus is that he used pagan myths and biblical motifs in his work. This shows his interest in Greek mythology and also his interest in Christianity. But after his friendship with Jean-Paul Sartre, and when he joined the circle of intellectuals, including Simon de Beauvoir, his interest and his philosophy shifted from Christianity to pessimism, hopelessness, and absurdity. And this is also because of Nietzsche and Arthur Schopenhauer's uh, approach or philosophy that had paved the ways towards pessimism and atheism. Nietzsche's philosophy contemplates the meaning and value of their significance to human existence. He also questions the purposelessness of human existence. And secondly, uh, Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy, that is also a German philosopher who also describes the exemplary manifestation of philosophical pessimism. So, both of these scholars or philosophers have paved uh, ways towards pessimism and atheism, and they both influenced Albert Camus' philosophy a lot. They shifted his mind towards pessimism and absurdity. Albert Camus was truly called a moralist, and as we know that moralist is a person who knows the difference between good and bad. So his morality is reflected in his politics. And as he claimed that morality should guide politics, so he thinks that his politics is based on the true morality of a person. That is why he strongly condemned the authoritarian communism, especially in the case of Soviet regime, and he considered that regime as a totalitarian approach in that aspect. So his politics is merged in the true morality, and there's also one thing that it is up to us, that what are our premises of goodness and badness, because Albert Camus was he was one who supported civil rights for indigenous Algerians, but he opposed Algerian independence war, which has damaged his reputation in his homeland. So it is his own mentality, his own thought, that what is good and what is bad in that time. So, according to him, his politics is based on the goodness, on the uh, goodness of future of Algeria, and in the goodness of uh, all human beings at that time. So he was politically active and he has his own rules. And the next point is that he was inclined to anarcho syndicalism, and his work, The Rebel, is truly representation of anarcho syndicalism. It is a political philosophy, an anarchist school of thought that is based on anarchist school of thought, and his work, The Rebel, presents uh, presents that how Albert Camus has opposed the idea of totalitarian communism while advocating libertarian socialism and anarcho-syndicalism. That is why he's called a pacifist. And a pacifist is a person who believes that war and violence is unjustifiable, is not justified in any way. So he's called the pacifist. And he disagrees with the idea of capital punishment. Capital punishment is known as a death penalty for any crime. So he's against all these types of violence and cruelty. And there is also another example that to feel the depth of his philosophy, as a common person, as a common sportsman, he liked football and swimming. But Albert Camus drew parallel among football and human existence, morality and personal identity. For him, the simplistic morality of football contradicted with complicated morality imposed by authorities such as the government, the state, and the church. And this is very apt example. In this slide, I'm going to discuss about the context of this novel, The Outsider, that this novel has been considered a classic of 20th century literature. And the first point, that this novel, The Outsider, it was written in French, and it is 4 to 5 times translated in English and many other languages. And as I have mentioned, a British author who is the first one, Stuart Gilbert. He was the first who translated this French novel into English in 1946. And uh, as you know, that this novel belongs to French and Algerian literature, so it is important to know about the style of Algeria, Algerian and French literature. And this novel has a strong connection with Algeria. All the setting uh, and the characters' background is from Algeria. So I want to add some points that in the I want to add some points that will clear your mind that about the origin of about and the background of Algerian culture. That in 1839 there was an unofficial colonial rule of France over Algeria, and it is known as colonial Algeria. Actually, that colonial rule was begun in 1830 with invasion of Algeria and lasted with Algerian War of Independence that was in 1962. And if we talk about Algerian literature, then we can observe that it has been influenced by many cultures, including ancient Romans, Arabs, French, Spanish, and Berbers also. Berbers were basically the ethnic group of several nations, mostly indigenous to North Africa. And during that time, Algerianism was a literary genre with political overtones that was born among French Algerian writers who hoped for a common Algerian future and culture uniting French settlers and native Algerians. So basically, they were in a favor of French rule over their country. This slide is also related with previous one, and as I told you that there were some Algerian writers who hoped for the common Algerian future with these French settlers, and they were hoping for the a mixture culture, a uniting French culture uh, with Algerian people. So at that time, Camus was the best known French writer ever to come from Algeria. A philosopher, a novelist, a playwright, whose most of stories are set in Algeria, and he supported civil rights for indigenous Algerians. He opposed Algerian independence war, which has damaged his reputation in his homeland. So he was also one of those writers who worked for the purpose to safeguard the cultural heritage born from French presence in their country, Algeria. Okay, students, in this slide, I'm going to discuss the French aspect or the French literary aspect of this novel. While French literature in Algeria, in which Albert Camus has participated and supported, this literature has grouped into three main periods. First period contains the assimilation from the beginning of colonial rule of France till 1945, and as I told you that colonial rule starts in 1830. And literature of this group supported French colonial regime, as I told you that most of the writers were serving the purpose to safeguard the cultural heritage. But still, we find themes in their work are like they are exposing the difficulty of assimilation into French culture and allusions and double entendre. It means that the double meaning, it means the ambiguity and the confusion. And the second period is of decolonization from 1945 to 1962. Algerian here, Francophone literature began as political tension rose in the nation and a war of independence began. Algerian Francophone means the, those Algerian people who used to speak French. So I'm going to repeat all this point. And that second period of this decolonization from 1945 to 1962. Algerian Francophone means those people of uh, those people of Algeria who used to speak French. That Algerian Francophone literature began as political tensions rose in the nation and war of independence began. In that period, there was an independence war of Algeria and there is a political tension. And in the third period of Algerian Francophone literature focused in the issues of urbanism, bureaucracy, religious intolerance, and patriarchy. Okay, students, in this slide, I'm going to discuss the Camus philosophy. Uh, what he says about life and its problem, he says that there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, that is suicide. He's saying suicide a philosophical problem, a philosophical aspect of life. How it is philosophical aspect of life that in this way you will feel that you are alive while committing suicide. You will feel that you are alive. And next line he says that judging whether life is or is not worth living amount to answering the fundamental question of philosophy, that if you don't have any fundamental answer of the question of related to your life, then it is better to commit suicide. uh, the word suicide, for me, that it is a way to get rid of life, a life that is meaningless, a life that is purposeless and distracted. So he says, uh, he grouped that suicide in two uh, two aspects. Like first is literary suicide, and the second is philosophical suicide. What he says about literary suicide, that it is something that we resign from our pleasures, from our happiness, and throws and throw ourselves to uncertainty of the world. While philosophical suicide is that, like, we have no answer of reality, we have the superficial answers to satisfy our own selves. Philosophical suicide means that you consider yourself as 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 a person who who is easily satisfied, who is easily influenced with the superficial answers. That is why he has supported the idea of absurdity. Uh, he is not only supported but applied the idea of absurdity or absurdism in his work. And this philosophy hold the idea, hold the basis, hold the teachings that man is always fail in his search for meaning. He is failed because world has no meaning. Camus considered himself as an atheist, and his lack of religious belief paved him to irrational and purposelessness of life, because religion formulated a rational and disciplined life. And here is another quotation, another saying of Albert Camus. He says, "Man is the only animal that refuses to be what he is." Here, Albert Camus is finding the similarity between the routine life, between the purposelessness of life of an animal and the human being. For him, both are living same life. And his thoughts are best expressed in Myth of Sisyphus, where he is comparing the same situation of life as animals have. Like both assumed themselves as happy, as contented, even in the punishment. Sisyphus himself assumed that he is the happy person. So here, Albert Camus is comparing the lives of animal and the human being as same, as full of suffering, full of unresponsive understanding, and full of futile, aimless activities, and believes that human beings exist in this chaotic world, chaotic universe, as purposeless beings, as aimless and distracted beings. Students, these are some major themes of the novel The Outsider. And the first one is existentialism. Although Camus rejected the label of existentialism, but his protagonist and his philosophy is very much penetrating in the novel, based on the philosophy of Jean Paul Sartre and other existentialist writers. So we can easily found the effect of existentialist philosophy. As Camus himself says that you're born, you live, and then you die. So this is the simple statement, but it has a very deep meaning, and that meaning, that analysis is related with the theory of existentialism. Camus believed that life is meaningless because everyone is going to die anyways. Apparently, he's not accepting the label of existentialism, but the philosophy of Jean Paul Sartre, based on existentialism. He incorporated his ideas of the world's indifference to human existence in many of his works. And there is no deterioration of relationships and understanding. So, students, this is your task, that you have to find textual quotations, textual lines that are related with these themes. So, it is your task, and I'll give you another task that is on next slide. Students, this is your task, and you have to make an assignment on this question, and you have a week, 7 days for this project.